He's a war hero. He's not running for the state office that he's held since 2006. Decided not to run for re-election. He's being talked about, though, in the mix of people looking at the 2012 Senate race. He's a father of 3. He's divorced. I say that only because allegations were made out in the public, and so very public earlier this year. He's a slimmer, trimmer state treasurer. Shane Osborn, my guest on Lincoln Live. I've never had you in here before, Shane. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Nice that we can get acquainted here. If you don't mind me going back, we'll get to your political career coming up, but if you don't mind, I have in my mind this image of you back on April of 2001 when you were steering your plane and the entire country became familiar with you and the heroic acts that you and the members of your crew undertook in order to safely land this crippled plane over Chinese airspace. When you close your eyes, Shane, and think back on those days, what images, what can you tell us about those days that maybe a lot of people don't know?
You know, it was a rough time, and a lot of time for self-reflection and figuring out what you're made of, quite frankly, and something that, I'd wanted to do all my life was serve. My mom ran the Veterans Home in Norfolk. She was director of nursing, and so I grew up raised by a single mom, and I had a bunch of surrogate fathers down there at the Veterans Home, and so I'd always wanted to serve. And so I'd always talked about it, and now I'd had to kind of put my money where my mouth was. It was a pretty rough 12 days. The mid-air collision, being a converted airliner, 24 people on board upside down is not a good position to be. It cut the other airplane in half and killed the other pilot, and we were lucky enough with God's help to get this airplane on the ground, and then you get taken off at gunpoint, and now the tough part begins. And so, if you sit in a chair for 6-7 days and they don't let you sleep and they tell you they're going to start killing your crewmates if you don't start answering questions, you get the ultimate gut check. Let's put it that way. So while it was a horrible experience to have come through it at a young age, I was 26 at the time, lets you know what you're made of, lets you know you truly do believe in everything you've talked about. With serving in this great country, and you also learn what it's like to lose freedom, and how precious that is. So, a lot of long moments of self-reflection and a lot of deals with the big man upstairs to get my crew home safe, and we did. We came back not only safe, but with our honor intact.
You wrote a book about it, Born to Fly: The Untold Story of a Downed American Plane, a Spy Plane. Did the media portray it accurately?
There was some things that we can't talk about because of the world I was in. I was in the reconnaissance world, and there was some things that I could talk about in the book that I wanted to not relay, so I wrote two versions of the book, one for young adults, which actually outsold the adult version, believe it or not, which I'm proud of because that was more focused on making the correct choices growing up and serving, serving a calling above yourself. And so the media was pretty accurate, but they were really excited about the midair collision. They wanted to kind of talk about it. Some of them would say a bump, and I said, no, it wasn't a bump. It took off part of the wing, the nose. The tail was damaged. I lost an engine. Another engine was damaged, and we were upside down for 9,000 feet in a airplane the size of a 737. That's not a bump in the road. And but the detention is where they had a hard time trying to relate with it. We weren't at war, but how were you treated? And they got into it a little bit. Some of the news venues did, but for the most part, they'd skim over it like we just hung out for 12 days and had, ate what we wanted and had some fun. And that was the part that I focused on a lot in the book, talking about how well the crew worked together, how my responsibility was to protect the crew. And so that's why I sat there, and they didn't let me sleep for 6-7 days, and then they'd let me sleep, maybe an hour or two a day. And interrogate me and threatening me with the everything they had to try and get me to first tell them what the airplane was going to do, and then when they realized that wasn't going to work, then they wanted me to publicly apologize. This was the start of the Bush administration. It was April of 2001, so there was a lot of standoff going on here, and I knew that my job was to take care of my crew and get home with my honor intact, and that's what I did. And once I think the Chinese figured that out, that the crew stuck together, we taught the Chinese something in those 12 days about what American men and women are made of.
But in preparation for that time, you and your crew, as you're up, down, and you're upside down, and you're flying, and you're getting ready to approach Earth, you take steps to either destroy or code in some way information that the Chinese couldn't handle.
Absolutely. Well, I'm up front holding up the airplane with my co-pilot and my engineers trying to keep us in the air. I was a pretty big guy back then, and it tore my shoulder apart holding the yoke up to keep it from going into the ocean. a good friend of mine, Johnny Ballgame's in the back with two guys holding on his leg, throwing smashing up the top secret laptops and things and throwing them out the window into the ocean, so they would dissolve in the salt water and wouldn't be usable. So that definitely was a team effort with all 24 people working together.
Now, the aircraft was taken apart piece by piece by the Chinese, and